Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are plunging into a work that is just monumental. It's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
And this isn't some abstract theory. This is an account that was forged in, truly the worst conditions imaginable.
Right. Frankl spent 3 years as a prisoner in Nazi concentration camps. And this book, it's really a blueprint for how, and maybe more importantly why, to live.
It really is a cornerstone of psychological thought. Frankl wasn't just trying to survive, he was actively observing. He was using his psychiatric training to understand how people responded when their entire world was destroyed.
So what's our mission with this deep dive?
Our mission is to see how those harrowing experiences led him to create and validate his core theory, logotherapy. And the central idea is that the most basic human motivation is the will to meaning.
And the book's impact is just staggering. It sold millions of copies. But what I find so interesting is that Frankl didn't see that as a personal success.
No, not at all. He called it an expression of the misery of our time.
He basically argued that if so many people are desperate for a book about meaning, it shows that the question of life's purpose is one that, as he put it, burns under their fingernails.
It's a sign that for all our modern progress, that fundamental need for purpose just isn't being met.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We should probably start where he did, with the 3 psychological phases of the camp experience.
Yes, because that experience is the bedrock. It's the validation for his entire life's work. The first phase he identified was simply shock.
The shock of arrival.
The shock of arrival. He describes being crammed into these cattle cars for days, and everyone is clinging to this desperate hope. He calls it the delusion of reprieve.
The idea that maybe, just maybe, it won't be as bad as the rumors say.
Exactly. Maybe it's just a labor camp. But that delusion was shattered the moment they arrived at Auschwitz and the selection process began.
Right. The sources describe about 1,500 people filing past this one SS officer.
An officer who stood with this careless ease, just pointing a finger, very leisurely to the right or to the left.
And they had no idea what it meant.
None. But that simple gesture was a choice between life and death. A point to the left meant the gas chambers. For about 90% of them, that was it. Hours later, they were gone.
Wow. And that initial shock, that stripping away of everything, it happened so fast. Frankl even had his life's work with him, didn't he? A manuscript.
He did. He was a psychiatrist, and he'd hidden his entire life's work, his research, inside his coat. He was trying to save this abstract piece of his identity.
And he tried to explain this to another prisoner.
Yes, to an older, more seasoned prisoner. And the response he got was just one single word.
Shit.
Screamed right in his face. It was a complete dismissal. And Frankl said that was the moment he knew he had to strike out his whole former life. Mm-hmm. It was all gone.
They were shaved, given rags to wear. They had nothing left but, as he says, their naked existence.
But this is where it gets really interesting, because even then, when everything was gone, Frankl observed something incredible. He saw that some people held on to what he called the last of the human freedoms.
The ability to choose one's attitude in a given set of circumstances.
Precisely.
Wait, let's unpack that.
Yep.
Because how can you talk about choice when people are literally starving to death? It sounds, almost contradictory.
And that's the key point. It's not about choosing your circumstances. That was impossible. It was about choosing your response to them.
Okay.
He saw men give away their last piece of bread. He saw them comfort others. They proved to him that a person is never fully determined by their environment. They were living proof of that Nietzsche quote he so often used. He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow.
He makes this personal, too. There's that story of him on a brutal march.
Yes, slipping on ice, freezing, barely able to move. But he escaped into his inner world. He started having these intense conversations with an image of his wife.
He could see her smile, hear her voice.
And he didn't even know she was still alive at that point. But he had this profound realization that love transcends the physical person. It didn't matter if she was there or not.
The salvation of man is through love and in love. That was the conclusion.
Yes. That inner life, that connection was something the SS could never touch. It was unassailable.
And this idea of choosing a higher value over personal safety, he'd actually lived that out even before the camps, with the immigration visa.
That's right. Just before the U.S. entered the war, he got a visa to go to America, a ticket to safety. But he hesitated.
Because of his parents. He was torn between his duty to them and, I guess, his duty to his life's work, to logotherapy.
An impossible choice. He was looking for a sign, any kind of sign, and he found it. It was a piece of marble from a synagogue that had been burned down.
And on it was a fragment of a Hebrew letter.
A letter from the commandment to honor thy father and thy mother. For him, that was it. That was the sign.
So he let the visa expire and stayed. He chose duty over opportunity.
And that choice is, in a way, the whole thesis in action, meaning exists outside the self, waiting to be fulfilled. So let's formalize that. Let's move to phase 2, logotherapy in a nutshell.
Okay, so logotherapy. You said it's all about the will to meaning. The word comes from the Greek logos, for a meaning. How does that fit in with, say, Freud or Adler?
Well, Frankl deliberately positioned it as the third Viennese school of psychotherapy. So the first was Freud's psychoanalysis, which focused on the will to pleasure.
Right, the pleasure principle.
The second was Adler's individual psychology, which centered on the will to power, that drive for superiority.
So Frankl comes along and says, you can have pleasure, you can have power, but if you don't have a why, a meaning, you're still going to be unfulfilled.
That's it, exactly. Meaning is primary. And he had data to back this up. He cites a French poll where 89% of people said they needed something to live for.
And the American survey of college students is even more telling.
It's incredible. 78% said their number one goal in life was finding a purpose and meaning. That just dwarfed the 16% who said making a lot of money.
That's a huge data point. It shows that even when material comfort is the goal, something deeper is pulling us toward purpose.
Which brings us to a really fascinating idea about mental health. You know, we often think the goal is balance, equilibrium, attentionless state, homeostasis.
To be relaxed and content.
Frankl argues the exact opposite. He says mental health requires a certain amount of striving, of struggle, of tension.
So that feeling of being pulled toward a goal is actually a good thing.
It's not just good, it's indispensable. He called it new dynamics. It's the tension between what you've already done and what you still ought to do. That gap between who you are and who you feel you could be, that's a sign of health, not sickness.
That completely flips the script.
Yeah.
So if that tension is healthy, what happens when it's not there, when you don't have a goal?
That's when you get what he calls the existential vacuum, inner emptiness. He called it the mass neurosis of the present time.
An inner void.
Yes. Because modern man has lost the guidance of animal instinct, and now he's also losing the guidance of tradition.
So you're left with no internal map and no external road signs. You don't know what you're supposed to do.
And in that vacuum, he says, you fall into one of two traps, either conformism, you just do what everyone else is doing, or totalitarianism, you do what other people tell you to do.
And this vacuum gets masked.
Absolutely.
Yep.
By depression, aggression, addiction. These are all attempts to fill that void.
So if you're stuck in that vacuum, how does logotherapy get you out? It sounds like it requires a huge mental shift.
It requires what he calls responsibleness, a radical sense of responsibility. He says we have to stop asking, what is the meaning of my life?
And instead?
Life is asking us. It's life that poses the questions, and we have to answer. We answer with our actions, with our decisions every single day.
That's a powerful reframing. It moves you from entitlement to obligation, in a way.
To really drive it home, he came up with this categorical imperative. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's brilliant. Live as if you were living already for the second time, and as if you had acted the first time as wrongly as you are about to act now.
Wow. Okay, so basically, act as if this is your second chance, and you already know how you messed it up the first time. It forces you to take every single action seriously.
It does. And he lays out 3 main ways we can discover meaning through our actions.
We've touched on the first 2 already, right?
We have. The first is by creating a work or doing a deed. Simple enough. The second is by experiencing something or encountering someone. And the most profound version of that is love.
Because love allows you to see the potential in the other person.
You see the meaning in them that they might not even see in themselves. And the third way, this brings us right back to the camps. It's the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering.
Which is the perfect transition to phase 3, the case for a tragic optimism.
Right. Frankl says you can and should be optimistic even when you face what he calls the tragic triad.
Which is pain, guilt, and death.
The 3 great inevitables of human life. But he argues they don't have to negate meaning.
This feels like the most radical part of his work. Finding meaning not in spite of suffering, but through it.
It is absolutely transformative, the story he tells about the elderly doctor. It's the perfect example.
The man who was devastated after his wife died. He couldn't get over his grief.
His life was just meaningless agony to him, and Frankl asked him a simple question. What would have happened if you had died first and your wife had had to survive you?
And of course, the doctor realized she would have suffered immensely.
Exactly. And in that one instant, his own suffering was reframed. It wasn't meaningless pain anymore. It became a meaningful sacrifice. He was sparing her this.
Suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds a meaning.
That's the core of it. And this connects so directly to the camp where people were valued only for their usefulness. If you couldn't work, you were a Muslim, marked for death.
Frankl's response to that is to champion the unconditional dignity of man.
And this is such a powerful critique of our own achievement-obsessed society. If we only value people for their present usefulness, Frankl warns, then we are logically on the same path that leads to eliminating anyone who's old or sick.
That's a stark comparison. Linking a modern focus on productivity to the philosophical justification for mass murder, it really makes you stop and think.
It forces you to ask where real value lies. And he took these ideas and made them practical. He developed clinical techniques.
Like paradoxical intention.
Yes, for dealing with things like anticipatory anxiety, the fear that actually causes the thing you're afraid of.
Or hyperintention, where trying too hard makes you fail.
And the solution he found was so clever. You invite the patient to intentionally try to do the very thing they fear.
You use humor and self-detachment to break the cycle.
Right. And the anecdote about the doctor who feared sweating is just perfect.
The more he worried about sweating in public, the more he did.
Ah.
A classic vicious cycle.
So Frankl told him, next time it happens, don't try to stop it. Intentionally try to sweat more. Resolve to show people just how much you can sweat. Pour at least 10 quarts, he told him.
And it worked. He was cured in a week.
It broke the feedback loop. Ultimately, Frankl's work is this powerful reminder of what humans are capable of. He says man is not fully determined. Man is self-determining.
He saw the worst of humanity, but he also saw the best. He says we all have the potential for both the swine and the saint.
And which one we become depends on our decisions, not our conditions.
So logotherapy doesn't promise you happiness. It offers you reasons to be happy. It points you toward a kind of super meaning that might be beyond our full understanding.
And he also completely reframes how we should think about time. We're always worried about the future shrinking. But Frankl flips that. He says, the only really transitory aspects of life are the potentialities.
The things we might do, those are temporary. But once we do them,
once they are actualized, a deed done, a person loved, suffering endured bravely, they are rescued into the past. They are preserved forever from being transitory.
And that leads to his most provocative statement, the real challenge he leaves for all of us.
I should say having been is the surest kind of being.
Which is a challenge to how we live, isn't it? We obsess over the future. But he's telling us to look backward for security, for our value. So when you look back on your day or your week or your life, what do you see? Is it a stubble field of things that just passed by?
Or are you filling what he called the full granaries of the past? With deeds done, loves loved, and suffering bravely suffered.
Since Auschwitz, we know what man is capable of.
And since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake. And on that note, we leave you to consider the unconditional dignity of your own being.